He moved through the dense violet fog with slow, deliberate steps, carrying the trembling alien young in his arms, while the ground vibrated beneath. His boots as if the planet itself questioned his presence, and yet he kept going, driven not by duty or protocol, but by a quiet, stubborn resolve that had always defined him, for he believed that a life in danger, whether human or alien, carried equal weight and equal worth, and that belief now pushed him past the shattered remains of a crashed shuttle, and across a field of glowing crystalline stones that reacted to his movement with soft pulses of shifting light. The young creature whimpered, pressing its small limbs against his chest, and he murmured, soothing sounds, knowing the being could not understand his language, but sensing that reassurance transcended words. He had found it trapped under fallen structures, its nest destroyed by the violent quake that had shaken the valley, and without hesitation he had dug through debris using hands, already bruised and cut, until he reached it and lifted it free. He had expected fear or hostility from the locals, for humans were still newcomers in this region of the spiral arm, but instead he found himself surrounded by towering figures of iridescent armor, each one humming with restrained tension. These were the royal guard of the alien queen, and they had arrived in a formation so precise it looked choreographed, their silhouettes sharp against the luminous dust of the valley. At first they had regarded him with suspicion, their luminous eyes flickering with unreadable patterns, but when they saw the young cradled in his arms, their posture shifted from hostility to curiosity, and when he stepped forward offering the child to them, their humming deepened into something like awe. He could not understand their gestures, yet their meaning became increasingly clear as one of them reached out, touched the young with trembling claws, then lowered its head in a slow, controlled arc that radiated reverence. The others followed suit, and soon a chorus of resonant tones filled the air, carrying a mixture of grief, relief, and gratitude. But then the sky tore open with the soundless flash of royal descent clouds spiraling out of the way as an enormous organic craft descended, its structure alive with shifting membranes and glowing veins. It landed with a thrum that spread across the ground like a heartbeat, and from its center emerged the queen herself, taller than any other of her kind, crowned with a crest of living light that rippled with every breath she took. Her presence immediately reshaped the stance of all her warriors, who bowed until their heads touched the ground. He remained standing because he did not know their customs, and because his arms still held the rescued young. He felt the queen's gaze sweep over him like the passing of a great storm, slow, deliberate, and filled with ancient intelligence. Her eyes reflected hues he could not name, and her expression, though alien, carried unmistakable weight. She approached with calm, measured steps, and he felt every muscle in his body tighten as instinct and humility collided within him. He wanted to bow, yet worried that moving might disturb the fragile young now stirring in his arms. The queen extended a limb, slender yet powerful, its surface shimmering with intricate patterns, and she gently touched the child. He carried the moment her touch met the young. Its trembling ceased, replaced by a soft glow that warmed his hands through its skin. A wave of sound passed through the gathering of guards, a sound that seemed to blend triumph, relief, and solemn declaration. He sensed the moment was rare, perhaps sacred, and he felt suddenly out of place, aware that he stood on the threshold of something far beyond his understanding. The queen's gaze returned to him, and in a motion swift yet gentle, she removed the young from his arms, holding it close with a protective grace that spoke of deep maternal instinct. As soon as she secured the young, her crest flared with new colors, and she turned her attention fully to him. Before he could react, the guards moved, surrounding him with synchronized precision. He felt no aggression in their stance, yet their sudden proximity made the air feel heavy, charged with significance. He raised his hands slowly, not in fear, but in an attempt to show respect and acceptance of whatever came next. The queen stepped closer until he could see the fine patterns of bioluminescent lines running across her form, pulsing like living calligraphy. She extended her other limb toward his shoulder and touched him gently, her touch warm, not threatening, but the meaning behind it rippled through the entire formation. The guards responded with a unified low resonance that echoed across the valley like a vow. He understood then that the queen was claiming him perhaps as an honored guest, perhaps as a guardian, perhaps as something else. Entirely, he felt the weight of her decision settle around him like a cloak he had not asked for, but could not refuse. She signaled with a graceful motion, and the guards parted, forming a corridor leading toward the living craft. Her posture made it clear she intended for him to follow. He walked forward, unsure of what awaited him inside the organic vessel. The interior pulsed with soft light and warm currents of air weaving between structures that resembled both architecture and anatomy. The walls shifted subtly, responding to the presence of those who walked within. The young rested in a cradle of woven fibers near the queen, who positioned herself beside it, watching him with an intensity that seemed to search beyond his physical form. She lifted one limb, and a harmonic tone filled the chamber. The walls responded by projecting images made of light and memory, scenes of storms, quakes, and destruction, then scenes of her people protecting their young, scenes of rituals centered on guardianship and loyalty, scenes of universal truths expressed in patterns beyond language, and finally a scene of him lifting the young from the ruins, carrying it with determination across a devastated landscape. The queen let the images dissolve into drifting motes of light, then pointed at him, then at the child, then at herself, her meaning clear. Her claim was not merely symbolic. She intended to bind him to their royal lineage as a protector, a role of immense honor within their culture, one not lightly bestowed, one rarely given to outsiders. He felt the enormity of the moment pressing against every thought, yet he also felt a quiet clarity, for he had acted not for glory nor reward, but because saving a vulnerable life was simply the right thing to do. And now that simple act had bridged a divide between species that negotiations and treaties had failed to cross. The queen produced a crystalline object grown from living material, shaped through careful cultivation. It hovered in the air between them, spinning, slowly emitting threads of luminous energy. She lowered her crest, touching it to the crystal, which responded by expanding into a halo of light. The energy reached toward him, brushing his skin with tingling warmth and forming shimmering patterns around his arms and chest, binding him with a ritual older than any of their recorded history. The queen watched him steadily, her expression solemn. As the ritual concluded, the light settling into faint marks upon his skin, symbols of his new status within their society. The guards bowed as he emerged from the vessel, their chorus resonating with tones of respect and acceptance. He realized that his life had changed irrevocably. By choosing compassion, he had been drawn into a role among an alien people who now saw him as more than a visitor. He was a guardian, a bridge, a symbol of unity in a galaxy where trust was rare and fear often louder than understanding. The queen approached him one final time, extending her limb toward him, not as a command, but as an invitation. He placed his hand upon hers, and together they stepped forward into a future. Neither species had imagined a future born from a single moment of courage and empathy, carried through the uncertainty of a trembling world and sealed by the ancient power of gratitude.